always invited me to sit down while he read the messages. And then the operations officers were both captains, and they were very cordial. And I happened to deliver the messages one day when they had a visitor, another Navy captain, and they introduced me to him as Captain Dufek. Now, Captain Dufek was one of the commanding officers of the task force that sailed to Little America, the Antarctic, after the war. There was a big push to re-explore and continue the work that Admiral Byrd had started in the 1930s. And they introduced me to Captain Dufek. Well, on their trip to the Antarctica, which, by the way, was the lead officer was Captain Richard Cruzen, who had been my commanding officer on the cruiser Birmingham and had been one of the staff officers with the 7th Fleet. He happened to be the commanding officer of this task force that went to Antarctica after the war. He had been Admiral Byrd's navigator when he explored the Antarctica in the 1930s. And so he was well aware of the area and so forth, spending a lot of time there. And a great guy. I like Captain Cruzen. Anyway, he had called a conference of the all commanding officers of the task force, and the only way that they could get to his ship was by being sent over on Breecher's Buoy, which was a rigging of a high line and a chair to hold the person, and then he was hoisted from one ship to the other as the ships proceeded along on course and right close to each other. Well, this Captain Dufek was going from his ship to the flagship, and as the two ships proceeded along in formation this way, one here and one here, the wave action on the sea started to move in this direction, and pretty soon it moved to where the two ships were at their extreme wave action, pulling against each other, and the line broke and Captain Dufek dropped into the ocean, into the Antarctic Ocean. And of course there was a motor whaleboat standing by, all revved up and ready to go, and they rescued him within a minute or less. They just sailed right over and grabbed him and pulled him into the boat, rescued him, and got him back aboard ship. But I may back up and say that there was a movie made of that entire operation. And oh, I forget the movie star who narrated, Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor was the narrator and of that movie and everything. Anyway, I met Captain Dufek in the operations office that morning, and so I just kind of made a joke about that. I said, well, how did that feel? He said, it felt like jumping into a frozen daiquiri, which is an alcoholic beverage made up of shaved ice. And we laughed. And very, very pleasant man. Not at all reserved where he couldn't speak to a junior officer. And he told me all about that experience. And these two captains that were the operations team they were just old farm boys, and sat in there. If they wanted a cigarette, they rolled a Bull Durham out of a sack. They rolled their own. They didn't smoke Camels or the other popular breeds. They rolled their own and have tobacco all over their desks, and they were just that kind of guy, and they were that way genuine when they all offered me to sit down while they read the messages. So that was an interesting experience I had. Got to meet the performer that the whole world saw dunk in the Antarctic Ocean. George Dufek was his name. And anyway, that was my job. Had very interesting talks at time with Rear Admiral Cooley. He hadn't, when I came into his office, he always offered me a chair and asked about me, my life, and he was a descendant of second president of the United States.
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. Yes, he was a direct descendant of Thomas Jefferson. And he told me an incident at one time when he was with other relatives and they were visiting Monticello, and there was a painting of Jefferson up there, and one of his relatives was a teenage girl, and she was there, and he said, we looked up at that big painting of Thomas Jefferson, and she was a spitting image of Thomas Jefferson. Quite interesting that the descendant would be a look-alike.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me a lot about Thomas Jefferson, his great-great-great grandfather or somewhere. And he was very addicted to nicotine. the first thing he'd do in his, when he came to work, was open the windows wide and the curtains and let the sea breeze blow in from Alcatraz and up the San Francisco Bay, and it was darn right cold. And he would have those curtains drawn open and let the sea breeze come in. And then he would light up a Camel cigarette, and he would directly inhale the smoke and just fill his lungs with cigarette smoke and blow it out. And everybody knew how he smoked. All the other officers that delivered messages, they all made comments about it. But that was his habit. He was a very, very nice man, good fellow.
So you served in that on Treasure Island for how long? And then you
What?
you served on Treasure Island for how long?
For 2 years.
2 years, and then where did you go from there?
I went to the Naval Postgraduate School at Monterey. It was new. And that was a 6-month tour. And it was just a great, great time. We moved from Oakland down to Monterey, and there was a branch at Pacific Grove, an LDS branch, and that's where we went to church at Pacific Grove. Don't remember any of the officers of the ward, but did meet one of the members of the ward was a guy by the name of Bill Smith, and I had met him at BYU and knew him quite well. And so we were good friends with him down there. And he was in the Naval Reserve, so every summer he had to train, had 2 weeks training, and he'd be up at Treasure Island, so we'd get together and have him over for dinner, and he became a real good friend.
Now, when Mom was recovering from her polio, your mom came out to take care of her.
Yes.
Was that at the house in Alameda?
That was in Alameda.
Yeah.
And Mother at that time was teaching school. She had her teaching certificate renewed, and she was teaching in the junior high school. So just as soon as school was out that year, she headed for California and spent the summer with us. And just a great time and a relief for me, and of course Marion too.